Today is lesson number 10, and it is on self-control. So we have love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. We remember that we talked about that being three triads, and it's really helpful to remember them by looking at it in groups of threes like that. And the love, joy, peace, the first three, that's kind of internal. The next three are more external, how we treat. And then these last three is more about how we grow in our spiritual walk, faithfulness, gentleness, and the self-control. What do you think of when you think about self-control? How would you define self-control? Not beating somebody up, that having self-control. There are so many idiots around us in the world today, and that's, you have to struggle to not want to correct some of that stupidity that we see around us every day. That's a pretty good definition of being in control or controlling yourself. What is the best definition of self-control as it relates to a fruit of the Spirit? Keep your control in Christ. I like that. Look at page 82 in the back of your book. This is also this last lesson talks about each one of these fruit of the Spirit again and gives a really good definition. I've been referring to that each lesson that I have. Look on page 82 in the middle of the page there about self-control. Self-control is allowing our spirit to be increasingly surrendered to Christ. Self-control is about surrender. If you think self-control is about you being in control, you're wrong. That's not what self-control is about. It's about surrendering our will and our control to God, to Christ, to His Spirit, and let that guide us so that we do the right thing, so that we control our lives in that way. To read on, it's a deliberate move to place my thoughts and actions under the guidance of Jesus. It's letting go of our control and letting God sit on the throne of my heart. Isn't that a good definition of the fruit of the Spirit, self-control? So, and that I'm learning so much. Whatever book we choose to use in this class, it teaches me a lot. It just hit me square between the eyes. Self-control is not about being in control. Are you in control of anything? Or are we really? And what happens when we try to do that? Chaos. You think you're in control? It don't go that way. You think that by your own will and by your own determination that you can do this or that. Doesn't always work out, does it? If the Lord wills, we'll do this or that. And that's the key. Thank you, Bruce, because we need to get back to the central part of this is surrendering our will to the Father's will. That is how we learn self-control. So that's the very first thing that I learned when I looked at the lesson on self-control. Now the scriptures that the book uses to talk about self-control is in the book of Daniel. And he uses Daniel as an example, and he uses Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as examples of self-control. When you think about Daniel in his situation, and these other three young men with him, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where were they? They were in Babylon. They had been taken captive. And that came and went in waves. I'm not sure if this was the first, the second, or the third wave, but Daniel and his friends were taken to Babylon, and they were actually in a pretty high place in the government. The king was King Nebuchadnezzar at the time, and he was going to put these men in the service of Babylon. And they were educated with everything that, with all the sciences, with all the politics, with everything that they would need to know to be in service to the king in Babylon. And he wanted them to be very healthy. So they ate at the king's table. What was at the king's table that was a conflict for them? The what? The food that they were going to be fed, the drink that they were going to be fed. What was the conflict? What was the conflict with that food? These were Jewish boys, young men. Kosher. There was ham sandwiches there. They weren't to have ham. They weren't to have pork. There was probably certain shellfish that they weren't to eat. Certain strong drink that they had not normally been partaking in. They would have to go against their belief in order to eat at the king's table. So they come up with a plan. Just give us vegetables and water for 10 days and see who looks better. These guys over here eating ham sandwiches and drinking wine, or us eating vegetables and water. And what was the outcome? They were a lot better. They were exceedingly better. They could tell by looking at them, ooh, their skin looks better. They look healthier. They look stronger than these guys that have been eating the choice foods off of the king's table. So they were allowed to eat their kosher food and not eat from the king's table. What else was a result of them doing it this way? How did God bless them? He gave them wisdom. He gave them knowledge. They were the best of the best of all of the people that were chosen to serve the king. These guys were the most successful. So God blessed them in that effort. And then a little bit later in the lesson, we'll look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, which was another. They were asked to bow down to the idol, and they did not. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But God blessed them. He was with them in that as well. So,
Is that where people get vegetarian?
Maybe.
Because, they try to prove everything.
Yeah.
And it is healthier even today, but that's not God's will that we have to not eat meat because they were commanded not to eat certain things.
They were commanded not to eat certain things, but it's not that they couldn't eat meat. They had meat. They just didn't have certain meats. But people choose to be vegetarians, vegans. There's so many different healthy lifestyles and diets that you can have. Josh said his was a Little Debbie. That's his weakness. But we just need to learn to make better choices. And that's also about self-control. It's There's nothing wrong with Little Debbie, but don't eat the whole box at one time. Moderation. Uh, someone gave me, I love Cheetos, but I can't eat the whole bag. Uh, my he well, then you may be getting some Cheetos then. All right. Um, I can eat 10, but if I go more than that, my glucose monitor blows off my arm. Uh, I like little hot tamale. They're like little jelly bean candies, but I can only have 5 or 10. If I ate a handful, I'm up at 300 for an hour and a half or 2 hours before it comes back down. And it's like, that's not good. I can't do that. We have to make better choices. I like those things, and you can have them in the moderation, but you can't go crazy. Self-control. But um, self-control is about surrendering our will to the Father's will. It's about making better choices. Um, each of us face temptations. There are some temptations that are not a temptation for me, but they might be for you. Find out what those things are and walk away from those temptations. The ones that you struggle with, make better choices. Choose a different path. Choose something healthier than hot tamales and Cheetos, if that's your weakness.
So three stands, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and pride of life. And we all fit in some of those categories that we struggle with. Pride is a big one.
It is.
You see it through the national TV all the time. People get all bent out of shape because of money or because of their lack of self.
Pride's a big one. Maybe the biggest one. So remember that self-control is about surrender. It's not about being in control. Think about making better choices. Think about choosing to walk away or a different path rather than to walking into something that's a temptation for you that will help you to be more self-controlled. Our book looks at 3 things about this story in Daniel, about Daniel and eating the vegetables, and about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. And it draws 3 conclusions from that relating to self-control. The first one is saying no to the world. But it's not enough just to say no to the world. The second one is saying yes to God. It's one thing to empty something out of your life that's not good for you, but if you don't fill it back up with something good, a lot of times that emptiness, if you don't fill it up with good, something else bad may just take its place. So say no to the world. Second is say yes to God and better choices. And the third one, self-control, trust that God knows best. You know, when we look at God's Word, when we look at the Bible from cover to cover, we see all these examples of good things that happen, bad things that happen. And there's a theme that runs through all of it, that God's got our back. God knows what's best for us. That's why He told us to stay away from certain things, because He knows that's best. That's why He told us to go toward certain goodness or good things. Fill your life with good deeds. And that's that natural outgrowth of fruit of the Spirit. When we trust God and we obey God and we surrender to God, there will be a normal, fruitful production that takes place. You will do good things. You will reflect the glory of God when you respect the glory of God. Might be oversimplification there, but it's like trusting God knows what's best for us. We don't always like to admit that. We like to, "Oh, I know best. I know what I want. I know what's good for me." And that might be true in some aspects of life. But when it comes to your spiritual health, God knows best. So applying his principles to our lives might sound like he just doesn't want us to have any fun. But that's not at all his heart. His heart knows that those things will not bring true happiness to us. It will only lead us farther from him. So, yes. And then the first example that we're given there is that Daniel and his three friends were in this situation where they could have very easily just done what everybody else was doing. It would have been very easy to just not say, God doesn't want me to eat those things. The king, I'm here in Babylon. I'm a captive. They want me to eat. I'll just eat those things. But they had enough trust in God and his plan to push back against that, and they were better for it. They became healthier, they became smarter, they became wiser, and they were used in a powerful way, even though they were captives in Babylon. They were used in a powerful way in Babylon.
God provided a miracle to bring them out of the fiery furnace because he knew their challenge and they obeyed.
Let's talk a little bit about Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and the fiery furnace. This was also King Nebuchadnezzar. There's actually 4 kings in the book of Daniel: Nebuchadnezzar, uh, Belshazzar, and that's confusing because Daniel's name was Belteshazzar. That was his other Babylon name. Belshazzar, uh, Darius for a short time, and then Cyrus. So Daniel lived and served under 4 kings just in the short time that he was in Babylon. This was still in Nebuchadnezzar. He had some advisors that said, "King, you're so great, we're going to make this golden statue. And everybody in the land is going to bow down to it to honor you." When the music plays, everybody just stops what they're doing and bow down to this golden statue. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego says, "We're not doing that. Our God says, you will have no other gods before me. You are not to worship idolatry." This went directly against who they were and what they were to be. So they said, "We won't do it." "Well, if you won't do it, we're going to throw you in a fiery furnace." Okay. And they said, "We still won't do it." This is in Daniel 3, verses 17 and 18. "Our God that we serve is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we will not bow down and worship and serve other gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up." Now that is self-control. If somebody held a gun to your head and said, "Do you believe in Jesus?" and knowing that if you said yes, they were going to shoot you, what would be your answer? It happens in other countries. That hasn't happened here, not that I know of. These men were going to be put to death if they didn't bow down and worship the idol. So be it. Our God is able to rescue us, but even if he does not, we will not bow down and worship that image of gold. Now, what happened? Did they get thrown in the fire? In fact, the furnace was so hot, the guys that threw them in died. That's how hot the furnace was. That was hot. That's hot. Have you ever seen a house fire? Have you ever been close enough to a house fire to feel the heat? Scary, isn't it? Have you been to a bonfire where you just build up a big bunch of brush, bunch of fire? How close can you get to that bonfire? If you no, you do that with a campfire. You roast marshmallows with a campfire. With a bonfire, you don't have a stick long enough to roast a marshmallow. Okay? I can remember a men's retreat that we had, and we had a roaring bonfire. We went out at night, we looked at the stars, we sang in the dark. And we were around this fire, and it was cold out because it was January, it was wintertime. And we were close enough to the fire that it was a little too close and a little too warm. And one of the guys, his coat was smoking. If he stood there very much longer, he was about to catch on fire. So we kind of backed him away a little bit. He had to stand in the back row for a while till he cooled off. You can get so close to a fire, you don't have to be in the fire, but you can be close enough to it, your clothes will ignite. Then you had to turn. It was like a rotisserie. You had to keep moving. You had to keep turning, or you could burn yourself. This fire was so hot that the guys that prepared the fire, the guys that pushed them into the fire, they were consumed. They died. Now,
Like a stove that we used to have at home when it was growing up, we had to rotate
uh-huh.
and keep it burned up.
Yep.
Get on fire.
You get too close to it, you'll catch on fire. So they're thrown in the fire. There's three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. But what do they see in the fire, in the furnace? They see four. There's a fourth man in the fire. The scripture says it looked like the Son of Man. Was this an angel? Was it Jesus? Some commentators think that this was a Christophany. This was an appearance of the pre-incarnate Christ in the fire with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, what was the result of all this? Did they get burned up? They brought them out. They were saved from the fire. Did they feel the heat? Probably. Well, they didn't get burned. In fact, their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. They didn't get singed. So, but they stood on their principles. They stood on what God had told them not to do. Don't bow down to idols. This was an extreme case of trial by fire. There's many Christian songs on the radio that talk about this. I think it's Mercy Me is one of the artists that talk about I know you're able, and I know you can to save through the fire by your mighty hand. But even if you don't, I will trust in you alone. It's about this story. There's another one by Jordan St. Cyr called Fires. This song was popular on the radio when I was going through my surgery, and it was a great comfort to me to know that God is in our trials with us. We looked at Psalm 23 today about going through the valley of the shadow of death. But I'll fear no evil because you are with me. Does God always keep us from the fire? But he promises to be in the fire with us. Fire in the sense of trials and suffering. We're going to have trials, we're going to have suffering. God never promised that we would not have trials and suffering. In fact, Jesus said, in this life you will have trials and suffering, but I will be with you. He is with us and he provides us a way through it. And as we come out the other side of it, we are stronger. It prepares us for what else might be coming. Life is not a resting place, but a testing place. James says, consider it all joy when you face sufferings of many kinds. Why? Why would you consider suffering joy? Because it builds trust and it causes us to persevere. And that perseverance prepares us for something greater. It makes us stronger spiritually. James says, that's James 1, I wrote it down. That's James 1, 2 through 4. Let's look at that real quick. By the way, when we finish looking at the fruit of the Spirit, we'll be looking at the book of James next. That's the book that I already have on order. Okay, so this is James 1, verses 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. Our trials prepare us for the next valley, for the next situation in life that we face. And just like exercising your muscles in the gym, when we're going through trials and suffering, and we're depending on God, we're trusting God to be with us and help us through that, it strengthens us. Now our muscles are stronger. So the next time temptation comes our way, it's easier to say no. We have the experience of that previous trial or that previous suffering to help us through the next thing that might come our way. That's the way we grow. That's the way we grow spiritually. And it's not commitment and determination play a part, but that's not what gets it done. What gets it done is surrendering our will to the Father's will. He gives us, the Spirit gives us the ability and the strength and the perseverance that we need to grow spiritually and to help us navigate all of the problems that we have in life. Life is virtually one problem after the next. How do we navigate that? Some people navigate it well, some people don't. The ones that do better trust God and his precepts, and know that he is with you even in the fire. Fire refines, it purifies, it strengthens, and it prepares us for not only what's coming next in this life, it prepares us for the life to come. So we're on this journey.
I thought it was interesting that Abednego was so mad he had to make the furnace 7 times hotter. That's how the devil does us today. When you're having a temptation, a lot of times he's piling temptations on top, trying to push you over the edge.
Yep.
We got to stay strong with our view towards God, then we're able to overcome it.
And when we do have that trust and we have that strong faith, even though the temptations seem to multiply, we have a way to escape. We have a way to combat that. We're prepared spiritually to endure it. Enduring trials is not fun. And when James says, count it all joy, that's tough to do. It's hard. It is hard sometimes. That's why it's so important to have a strong faith and worship with brothers and sisters that know that we have somebody to go to and to lean on and to ask for help when we need help. I'm struggling with this. Has somebody been through this? Can somebody walk through this with me? Can someone help me? Give me your experience? Because we're not prepared. We just can't do it on our own will alone. It takes trust that God has us and that God is with us and that God's going to prepare and provide everything that we need. Does that mean everybody's going to be healed? Nope. But he's going to take us home to heaven, even though we're not healed in this life.
All these attributes are tapping into the Spirit to help us. We can't do it alone.
We were never meant to do it alone. In fact, that is the teaching. You cannot do it on your own. Those that try to do it on their own are going to fail. Don't trust in your own strength. Trust in the Lord's strength. What did Paul say about weakness and strength? When I am weak, then I am strong. When we admit we can't do this, it is out of my control, give it to God. Trust God in His plan. Know that He is with you. Be faithful, surrender to His will, and you'll get through it. You might not get out of this life alive, none of us will. But it's okay on the other side because you would have been faithful.
Much of life and living is what we endure with these circumstances. I don't know whether you call it faith or what, but God proves reality. He's proving to us that He is what He says He is and can do what He does.
He's teaching us. He's teaching us to trust Him. Every one of us can think of a time when we had to trust God, when we could not handle things on our own.
That is a good example. We all going to die. We have friends that die and family. And it's a hard recovery.
And there are so many other things that we go through short of death, but financial ruin, emotional bankruptcy. There are so many things other things that can happen that are just as bad as death. Some might even be worse than death. When you think about, I think about some of my friends that have gone through a divorce. Divorce is worse than death because you're not with them anymore, but they're still alive. If they were dead, it might be a little easier to take, but they're still around. They're still kind of in your life. Divorce is hard. You can think, fill in the blank. You can think of many situations where we're beside ourselves. We don't know what to do. We're not in control. And those are the times where we need each other and we need to give it to God and trust that He can work it out, that He will be with us and He will provide.
We can say all the right things and have a strong faith and have strong trust, but also have a heart. And that's where knowing Scripture is when I'm doubting and I'm thinking, why is this happening?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how can it be? I didn't have the Scripture to renew that strength and
that's
trust. I would be in a world.
and that's a struggle. But you're working through it because you're struggling with God, trying to figure out, why is this happening? Is there a better way? Do I need to change something about my life? What can I do?
Especially when you know there's nothing,
Yeah.
no change that can be. Just have to look at the Scripture, know it's going to be okay.
Knowing that this self-control as fruit of the Spirit, like we're talking about, it's not about being in control. It's about submitting. It's about obedience and submission to the Lord. That is the self-control that we're talking about. So now, what we've already defined what self-control is as it pertains to fruit of the Spirit. So how does this type of self-control proclaim to the world about what authority we live under?
It tells what's in us. It tells what's in us. People know if we're harsh or right.
People are watching us. They see how we react to struggles and trials and temptations in our lives. When we submit and obey God, even when bad things are happening in us or around us, people see that and they know that God's in control. It points to Him and gets it off of you, because you're not in control anyway. You can't do it. But it points others to Jesus. It points others to submission to God. And that's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. That's what Daniel did. We can learn lessons from Daniel, from the book of Daniel, and see how God blessed them and was with them, even though they were confronted with all this outside pressure about conforming. And they stood up and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to obey God. We're going to submit to God. And He's able to rescue us. But even if He doesn't, we will not bow down to your idols. We will obey God instead. And we know that God blessed them for doing this. They were more successful. They were wiser than any of the other young men that were chosen to serve in Babylon. And they were able to even do greater things in Babylon. They interpreted dreams of the kings. Daniel interpreted, I think maybe it also said that maybe some of the others could do that as well. But the story we have is Daniel interpreting those dreams for the king. It was also Daniel that saw the writing on the wall. That was Darius, I think King Darius. But they were successful. God was with them. God blessed them. And they were able to do even more because they submitted. They submitted to God and what He had planned for them, much better than what they could have planned for themselves. Well, that pretty much covers the discussion questions in the back, and we kind of covered how we're to say no to the world, but we need to fill it up with saying yes to God, and then knowing that God knows best, that God's in control. He has a plan for us,
Love not
and
the world, neither the things in the world. Love the world's in us, we don't have God in it. We get caught up in that, but we still have the Spirit in us.
it's a struggle because we're in the world, but we're not to be of the world. But it's all around us. And every day it's pressuring us to conform rather than to obey God. Put your armor on. Thank you, Ronnie. And part of the armor is the fruit of the Spirit. Stay connected to the vine. What happens in the vine is not connected? It does not produce fruit. It dies. We must stay connected to Jesus in order to bear fruit. We have like 3 more lessons that are kind of application lessons about what we've learned from studying these 9 fruit of the Spirit. And it's going to take us 4 weeks to do those 3 because I think we've got a 5th Sunday in there, the 29th of June. So we'll finish up after that. So we've got 4 more weeks, 3 more lessons, and then we'll be looking at the book of James. That's all I have, unless somebody's got something else. Thank you. See you next week.